Hello, my name is Linda Shore, and I'm the director of the Teacher Institute at the Exploratorium.
I'm Mike Petrich from the Exploratorium. I'm the director of the Learning Studio.
I'm Karen Wilkinson, and I am a project director out of the Learning Studio.
David Barker, I'm a senior graphic designer at the Exploratorium.
I'm Lori Lambertson, and I'm one of the teachers in the Exploratorium Teacher Institute.
And I'm Luigi Anzivino, and I'm scientific content developer at the Exploratorium.
The Exploratorium's role in this project was basically to bring the Exploratorium's philosophy of hands-on learning, scientific investigation to the monasteries of India. The Exploratorium's culture and history is all about questioning authority, questioning things that you take for granted, discovering things that surprise you, then doing investigations on those surprising things and trying to figure them out for yourself. And that's exactly the way these monks sort of approach life. You know, let's find things that surprise us. Let's find things that we want to do inquiry on. Let's try to figure this out. Let's question everything around us.
One of the first things we tried to have the monks do was figure out what mechanisms might be involved in making these contraptions move in various ways. We had them draw and then discuss what they'd drawn, and one of the things that struck me was, again, how physical they were in their expression of their ideas, and how little, I want to say, respect they had for boundaries that maybe we assume would be there. It would be very easy for them to just pick up whatever object was around and use it and try to make their point, and how lively that process was.
Arriving in India, not knowing much about Buddhism at all, and spending time with the monks was an eye-opener in many ways, but I think probably the most intense part for me was just how absolutely focused and imaginative they were, and being able to shift from looking at things in the physical world and thinking about them very deeply, but also arguing different perspectives. I mean, I had no idea they would be so gifted in that way.
They were thrilled to do this and overly eager to explain to each other, to make drawings to one another, and actually came up with some pretty interesting ideas. Not all of them were the quote-unquote right answer, but at least all of their ideas were their own ideas.
We had a number of activities that were dealing with the idea of visual perception. So we used some illusions as a way of sort of tricking the eye-mind system in order to show how the system worked. We had spinning discs, which we made with CDs, with marbles hot glued into the middle, and then we put a piece of paper on it that had a pattern on it. One of them is the famous Benham's disc, which is a black and white pattern of circular lines and then a black semicircle. And when you spin it, you see a variety of colors, from deep reds to deep browns and greens and blues. And this is very unexpected because you're getting colors out of a spinning black and white object. This has a lot to do with how the eye-brain system works and sort of the differing receptive times of the cones in the eye.
Did you see it? See the colors?
I see the color.
What colors did you see? Brown?
At the middle, downward, I see a blue color, and then a little bit upward, they are kind of yellow, and one is little dark yellow or brown, something.
It's almost like a burgundy kind of color I see sometimes too.
Sometimes
like
a little bit darker.
Yeah, but it's a black and white. It's all black and white, and how's it creating color? Yeah, that's good. That's good.
One thing I wanted to show the monks was what the seasons are like in different parts of the globe, not just in their location in India, but what about North America? What about the Antarctic and Arctic regions? And that was very interesting to them to think about what the seasons might be like on other parts of the earth. So by the end of my time with them, they not only learned cosmology in terms of the sun and the stars and the galaxies and the relationships between all of those objects to each other. What's more important, they learned how to teach those concepts to students. What's the best way to guide students through a study of the universe that makes sense to students, that allows them to conceptualize these incredibly large and incredibly distant objects?
Just put it here in Greenland.
We have an exhibit on the floor of the Exploratorium called Visible Effects of the Invisible, which helps us see the effects of sound vibration. We made a membrane by stretching a piece of saran wrap over a cup with a rubber band. We pulled the saran wrap so it was quite tight across the opening of the cup, and then we sprinkled a very unmassive, very lightweight material. I had parsley flakes with me in my luggage, and we put some parsley flakes on top of this membrane. I then asked the monks to make some loud noises, see if we could see the effects of sound vibration. I borrowed some materials from the kitchen at Deer Park Institute to use for this experiment. When the monks saw that I was using a metal plate and a metal spoon, they tried to do the same thing with a paper plate, and we found that was not a very effective strategy. The coolest experiment that they tried was one of the monks tried his throat singing.
One of the interesting things about the monks teaching these types of activities is that it allowed us to reflect on our own teaching practices. So here in the U.S., when we share some of these activities, we might do them in 2 or 3 hours. With the monks, those 2 or 3 hour activities turned into activities that lasted 2 or 3 days. And so I'm curious to see how much that's extended once they start to truly understand more about what they were doing with us and how they translate that to the students that they're working with.
Just giving them that experience of being really physical with the materials and figuring out motions and the way things work. It's a really active way of thinking about how you imagine things working and then actually trying it out yourself. And it was really terrific to see them come up with things we didn't expect and figure out things in really imaginative ways.
I actually started to get to the practice of figuring out a hypothesis and then ways of disproving or proving that hypothesis, which is, of course, part of the process of science. Little did I know that in their tradition, this is something they are trained to do. So,
one of my goals was to help them find more ways to teach the science in a hands-on way. Their tradition is much more lecture-based. This is a challenge for them, and it's something new for them. And I'm delighted that I was able to help them think about how to do this in their own monasteries.
Like beginning science teachers back in the States, they tended to rely a little bit on lecturing. And that made complete sense to me because beginning teachers are often a little uncomfortable letting sort of control go of the class and letting the class do inquiry on their own. And so it also wasn't surprising to me when every time they taught the class, they loosened up a little more and a little more. They were willing to give up control to the students ever so slightly every time they repeated the lesson to another group until at the end of the days, these monks were starting to let the students kind of take over and grab the marbles and grab the objects and try to figure out some of these ideas on their own.
So I would say all in all, it was an incredibly successful experience on both sides. I mean, we learned a tremendous amount about ourselves from the monks, and I think they learned a lot about the Exploratorium's approach to teaching and inquiring about the world around them, and I think everybody came out on top in the end.